So union organizing campaigns have succeeded at Amazon.com, at Starbucks, and at Apple stores. Does this mean a resurgence in the labor movement? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So back when I was in graduate school, I remember one of my economics professors talking about the fact that we've basically made labor unions illegal here in the United States. And separately, I remember in law school, one of my professors asking the class of students, if you were a labor union, what would you do under the law? And the truth is, none of us really had a very good answer to that. And the reason is literally, although unions are theoretically protected here in the United States, for all practical purposes, the laws have made them illegal. Check this out. In the recent organizing drive that resulted in a union win at the JFK 8 Amazon facility in New York, Amazon actually fired and later arrested the person who was organizing the union. They hired consultants and spent over $4.5 million on an effort to defeat the union, while the union itself raised, about $120,000 from a GoFundMe site. The union organizer who was fired, Christian Smalls, was arrested for the horrible crime of bringing food to his fellow workers. I'm sure that's the reason the police were called on him by Amazon, right? Now, the truth of the matter is that the last time Congress passed pro-union legislation was back in the 1940s when it passed the Taft-Hartley Act. Since then, both Congress and especially the courts have gone through a relentless effort to try to destroy unions here in the United States and essentially make them illegal. And they've been very successful at it. Unions, which once had as members nearly a third of the American workforce, now represent about 6% of the American workforce. And the assaults just don't stop. Some of the tactics that employers are able to use include things like calling the police on union organizers for trespassing, exactly what Amazon did to Christian Smalls. And in fact, recently, the U.S. Supreme Court made a decision that basically banned from farms union organizers trying to organize migrant farm workers. So how else are they supposed to talk to them? Well, at the same time, union organizers are basically banned from talking to the potential union members. Employers engage in a tactic called mandatory meetings, where essentially they call in all the workers while paying them and force them to sit through an ideological education akin to the kind of thing you'd see in the movie Brazil, where they essentially threaten the workers and do everything they can to try to scare them away from voting in favor of the union. So if this seems to you like the unions are playing on an uneven playing field, you're right. It's not surprising, then, that Amazon has been so successful in defeating unions in most places, as have, by the way, Starbucks and Apple and pretty much most other American employers. The reality is, I remember back in the 1980s when people would say, oh, I remember back in the past, there was a time when we needed unions here in America. But that time has passed, and now unions are mostly corrupt and really don't do what they're supposed to. Well, I think it's fair to say that the pendulum has shifted back, and now unions are likely needed again. I mean, if you want to see evidence of that, just look at the rising inequality here in America. In fact, the increases in inequality correlate almost exactly with the decline in union power here in the United States. Amazon prides itself on the fact that it pays decent wages to its employees and gives them good benefits. But do you think they'd do that if the threat of being unionized didn't exist? And in fact, research has consistently shown that union workers tend to be paid more than non-union workers. And there are other aspects to the law and recent court decisions that have made employees even have less power. For example, antitrust law has basically been eviscerated by the courts. Every time Congress has passed legislation to address one of these issues, the courts essentially go in and try to undermine the intents of Congress. And they've certainly succeeded in doing so with antitrust law, resulting in a huge consolidation of American business. Now, the reason this is relevant to this issue is consolidated employers are able to fend off union efforts better. And where at one point, employers used to create situations where they had a company town, where employees really had no choice but to go to work for the one employer. And as a result, that employer was able to basically dictate wages and benefits. Now, as a result of consolidation, we practically have a company country controlled by a few companies who basically dictate what wages are going to be across the board. People really don't have a lot of choice as to where they're going to work. I mean, I've been the first to say that as far as consumers are concerned, Amazon has been a boon for us. Frankly, Amazon results in better service, better products, and lower prices. All good things. But the place that they've used the power they've gained as a result of consolidating their industry has been in keeping down their employees. And that's evident in how they've been able to defeat the unions in so many of these locations. So the truth of the matter is, while we need to celebrate these victories, and celebrate them we will, because they are rare and impressive accomplishments by the organizers and by the workers, we also need to be worried because they are rare and are unique occurrences. They should be less rare. This should be an even playing field for the union and the employer to basically communicate with the employees and let the employees make their own mind up. For that to happen will require federal legislation. And as it turns out, legislation has actually passed the House, the PRO Act, and President Biden's in favor of it. In theory, if we got rid of the filibuster, that legislation could pass the Senate as well. Even if we carved out an exception to the filibuster, that legislation could pass. That's why I've called repeatedly on the unions to pressure Democrats, particularly Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, the moderates who've stood in the way of passing so many things, but frankly who owe so much to the union support that they've received over the years, to pass this legislation, if nothing else. What's more is that this is something that people support. In fact, higher percentages of people now say that they would vote in favor of unions than has been the case for decades. People are realizing that employers are getting away with murder while the employees really haven't made out all that well. And pretty much the only way to address that is through unions. Finally, it's worth noting that Republicans have drawn a lot of their recent strength from the white working class. And that's a group who are particularly in favor of unions. Are unions perfect? Absolutely not. Can they be criticized? Absolutely. But at least they give the workers a voice. And unless Congress passes something during this narrow window of opportunity we've got, something that I see relatively little sense of urgency about among both Democrats and the unions themselves, then employers will continue to roll over the rights of the workers with the blessing of Congress and the Supreme Court. Well, if you want to check out a video about specific action that the Supreme Court has taken against union rights, check out this video over here that I recorded a while ago. The Supreme Court has made it clear that they stand on the side of the rich and employers and against the rights of workers. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.